The night the sirens cut through our neighborhood, I thought it was just another summer scare, someone burnt dinner, a barbecue gone wrong, but by the time I got to the front yard, the sky was already losing its color and the air smelled like something that used to be furniture. I remember thinking, offhand, that it looked like any other emergency until I saw her Gloria Hale standing in front of her old Navy SUV like it was a wall, arms folded, face set the way people do when they're about to enforce a rule they made up in their head. That 3-second image is the one that sticks. Siren, smoke, Gloria in the road, and the whole street somehow holding its breath. We live on Willow End Drive, a sleepy lane that prides itself on trimmed hedges and polite nods. I'd been in this house for 12 years, watched kids grow taller than their bikes, watched porch lights flicker on and off like clockwork. Gloria moved in 3 years ago, shiny clipboard, polite smile, and a kind of small authority that finds a way into your morning. She greeted the mailman like he'd missed a meeting. She joined the neighborhood association, said all the right things, but there was a line under that smile that showed up when she cornered someone about a fence height or a rose bed planted too close to the sidewalk. It was the sort of thing she enjoyed, being the person with a clipboard. It made her important in ways the rest of us weren't trying to be. That night, a house down the block, he won't use the real address, call it 42 Linden, caught fire. Flames licked the eaves before the first fire truck turned the corner. The engine's lights were a blur, boots hit pavement. The captain was barking orders like it was a drill. Then Gloria pulled her SUV sideways across the street and got out, like she was putting up a roadblock for a parade she didn't want to be in. People started filming before I even realized why it felt wrong. She wasn't pacing like a person worried about danger. She was pacing like someone who'd found a loophole in a contract. "Move your vehicle," the captain said, calm but sharp, and Gloria smiled, that smile again, the one that says she knows how to play you. "I can't have heavy trucks on our block without prior notice," she said. "It's in the community rules. Oversized vehicles need approval. I need to see your permit." You can hear it now, when I think about it later. The ridiculousness and the danger wrapped in the same sentence. A permit? For a fire truck? The captain reached into the truck, the microphone making his voice flat and official, and tried to explain the obvious. "We have a structure fire. My emphasis is an emergency. We need access." She crossed her arms and raised her chin like she was reciting something she'd practiced. "I represent the association. I'm responsible for the safety of," and then she stopped herself, because safety was a word she wielded when it suited her, not when it interfered with the theater of enforcement. Neighbors gathered, some out of concern, most out of the morbid curiosity that 3 years in a small town breeds, and you could feel the minutes doing damage. Flames don't wait for bylaws. A little boy across the street, maybe 12, had his phone up, filming with a seriousness that made my chest tighten. I remember Mrs. DeLuca from next door, clutching her robe, whispering, "Good Lord, move the car, Gloria," like it was an appeal to the one decent part left in her. The captain kept it measured. He asked for the vehicle to be moved. He explained that hoses wouldn't reach if they had to park up the block. He asked how many people might be trapped inside, questions she couldn't parry with a clipboard. At one point, a firefighter unclipped a mask and leaned in, voice softer, like he was trying to talk to another person, not someone who thought rules were a substitute for empathy. "Ma'am, please move the vehicle. We're trying to help." Gloria's answer was a glare. "I'm documenting," she said. "You're damaging the pavement and blocking access to residents' homes. I'll be filing a complaint." And then the house god flares up like a punch. The roofline opens like a mouth. The fire jumps the fence, and in the space between my breath and the next, the whole thing flips inside out. The truck she blocked? The one she thought needed a permit? It was the one getting water into the yard, the one trying to save a life. In an instant, the street was no longer about bylaws. It was about how small acts of control can turn into something that takes a life or leaves a family with ash. People shouted. Neighbors who had been watching from their driveways now ran, hands flapping, trying to pull that SUV away by themselves. Gloria fumbled with keys like a deer caught in headlights, like reality and rulebook had pulled in opposite directions, and she didn't know which way to turn. An officer at the scene stepped forward. This part is hazy because everything was moving so fast. That told her she needed to move. She refused, and he put his hand on her shoulder to guide her to the curb. She pushed back, sharp words exchanged, and someone shouted obstruction, which is a heavy word if you've never heard it used on your street. They put her in cuffs. Watching someone you half respect get led away by a uniform is a peculiar thing, humiliating, sure, but also revealing. I felt an odd sympathy for her in that moment, not because she was right, but because you could see the thing she'd built for herself cracking, the identity of controller, the power she'd carved out in the HOA meetings, the little rituals of authority. What she hadn't accounted for was consequence. That a person can be right about a rule and still be catastrophically wrong when time is burning. The firefighters did their job. They streamed hoses. They hustled people out of a neighboring house that had been ignoring smoke alarms. They kept the line steady while someone sprinted to get an oxygen tank. The kind of messy bravery you only see in those moments was there. A neighbor I'd never spoken to handed a blanket to someone with soot on her face and said, "You're okay. You're okay." Like it was the only prayer he knew. After the flames were out, and the street smelled like wet ash and regret, evidence mattered. Bodycam footage of the captain calmly ordering, phone videos from 3 different neighbors, the passenger window camera that Gloria apparently left running, everything lined up in a way that made the story simpler than it felt. Person blocks emergency vehicle, person refuses to move, emergency vehicle forced to reroute, house damaged in part because of minutes wasted. Legal terms got tossed around: obstruction, reckless endangerment, but the human part was what kept making my stomach knot. How a need to be seen as right can become the very thing that makes you wrong. The fallout was quick in some ways and slow in others. Gloria's name went around like a rumor with receipts. The neighborhood association convened in a meeting that smelled of coffee and anger, and people who'd nodded politely at her knew enough to cut ties. There were insurance questions and a civil case that dragged months into paperwork, but the social consequence was immediate. Friends who had once accepted her houseplants and her charitable donations shifted their chairs away from the edges where she liked to sit. She lost the little podium she prized and the authority it gave her, but she also lost something less tangible: the illusion that a rule could stand in for being reasonable. I tell this story now because it's not just a tale about a woman who made a mistake. It's a portrait of how control can be a kind of currency and how, when people hoard it, everyone else pays. Gloria's motives didn't come from nowhere. She'd been bruised before divorce, financial strain, the slow erasure people feel when life doesn't turn out the way it was promised, and clinging to order was easier than facing that blur. But motive aside, the moment she chose a bylaw over a human life is the part people remember, the part that gets replayed on phones and in courtrooms and at Thanksgiving tables years later when someone says, "Remember when?" There's also a piece about community responsibility that sits heavy with me. We like to think neighbors are background, but we're not. We hold each other up, or we watch each other fall. The dozen people who stepped in to move cars, to hand blankets, to film evidence, to give statements later, were the counterweight. They didn't let an authority complex decide who lived or died. And that's what a neighborhood should be. Not a place where one person enforces their whims, but where people look out and act when someone needs help. The last time I saw Gloria, months later at the post office, she looked older, like the edges of her smile had been sanded down. She avoided the subject when someone brought up the fire, and I couldn't tell if it was shame or survival. Maybe both. People talk about justice like it's a clean line, but its messy legal systems catch some things, social tides catch others, and the truth is often a mixture of accountability and forgiveness, depending on who's doing the telling. I don't want you to leave thinking this is a simple story. It isn't. It's messy, and it's human. People make mistakes. People build little empires of importance. And sometimes those empires intersect with moments that are life or death. All I want is for us to think about what we value. Are we going to let paperwork replace compassion? Are we going to let someone's need to be right become more important than the person who's burning? Those questions sound dramatic, but they happen on cul-de-sacs and in city blocks and in the quiet between the siren and the truck. So here's what I want to know from you. What would you do if you were standing in my shoes that night? Would you pull on an SUV? Or would you stand back and watch rules win? Is there a line where rules matter more than human life? Or is that a place no sane person should ever let themselves stand? Drop your thoughts below. Tell me what justice looks like to you, what accountability should mean, and whether we forgive the people who make monumental mistakes or whether we let the law do it for us. If this story taught me anything, it's that the difference between a neighbor and a stranger is often a split-second choice, and those choices add up to the community we live in. Share it, argue about it, And if you like this, subscribe because there are more neighborhood stories, messy and true, that deserve a hearing.